The streets of New Delhi in mid-December are notoriously punishing. A thick, freezing fog settles over the pavement, forcing most people indoors and leaving the roads quiet, isolated, and shadowed under the glare of yellow streetlights. On December 16, 2012, that bitter winter environment became the backdrop for a crime that would force a nation to look at itself. That evening, a young physiotherapy intern, later known to the world as Jyoti Singh, and her friend boarded a private white charter bus to head home after watching a movie. Inside, they were ambushed by 6 occupants. The attackers viciously assaulted Jyoti, beat her friend, and eventually threw both victims out of the moving vehicle, leaving them bleeding on the tarmac of a highway. A highway patrol passing by the Mahipalpur flyover eventually spotted them on the side of the road. Officers immediately called for an ambulance, initiating a desperate medical response. In a metropolis of over 20 million people, violent crime is a daily reality. But the extreme, calculated cruelty of this specific attack pierced the city's usual apathy. It forced citizens to confront the reality of women's safety in their own neighborhoods. Local authorities moved quickly. Police cordoned off the highway stretch, documenting the horrific state of the victims and securing the immediate physical evidence. Meanwhile, Jyoti and her friend were rushed to Safdarjung Hospital. Jyoti's internal injuries were so severe that trauma surgeons realized they were dealing with a level of bodily damage rarely seen outside of war zones. Medical staff and local police were visibly shaken. Details of the trauma leaked from the hospital corridors to local reporters. The sheer barbarity of the police reports cut through the standard news cycle, demanding headline coverage across local networks. Within hours, the facts of the case bypassed standard crime filters. The inhumanity of the incident gripped the entire country, unifying millions of Indians in a shared state of grief and outrage. The investigative response was remarkably swift. By reviewing CCTV footage from highway toll plazas, investigators successfully identified the specific white bus used in the assault. Within days, law enforcement tracked down the 6 suspects. Arrests were made in rapid succession, pulling the perpetrators from various locations across Delhi and neighboring states. The prosecution built an airtight case. They linked the suspects directly to the crime scene using hard forensic data, matching DNA evidence and bite marks left on the victim to the arrested men. As the legal net closed around the attackers, Jyoti's medical condition continued to deteriorate. In a desperate bid to save her life, the government arranged an emergency airlift, transferring her to a specialized organ transplant facility in Singapore. The damage to her body was too extensive. On December 29, 2012, 13 days after the attack, Jyoti Singh passed away from massive internal injuries. Her passing removed any lingering sense of anxious hope. The collective sorrow of the nation instantly ignited into outright, system-shaking fury. Citizens poured into the streets. Huge crowds, largely led by students, converged on the capital's most significant political monuments, massing around India Gate and the Raisina Hill district. These demonstrations had a clear, philosophical demand. The protesters aggressively rejected the culture of blaming victims for their own assaults, pointing the finger squarely at systemic legal and police failures. Caught completely off guard, the state responded defensively. Authorities heavily barricaded the city center, deploying water cannons and tear gas in a panicked attempt to suppress the overwhelming crowds. Yet the nature of the protests adapted. While the days saw intense clashes with riot police, the nights transformed into vast, solemn vigils of solidarity, illuminated by thousands of candles. The scale and focus of this movement marked a departure from past civic actions. The crowds actively indicted India's patriarchal legal framework, refusing to leave the streets until the law itself changed. The sustained public pressure worked. The government, unable to ignore the millions of citizens occupying the capital, capitulated and ordered the rapid formation of a special legal reform committee. Led by former Chief Justice J.S. Verma, this 3-member panel was given a strict mandate: completely overhaul the country's archaic criminal laws regarding sexual violence. This chart illustrates the direct results of their work, codified in the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013. The legislation significantly increased minimum sentences and fast-tracked the judicial process for crimes against women. Crucially, it expanded the definition of sexual assault, criminalizing offenses like stalking, acid attacks, and voyeurism, crimes historically ignored. The citizens of India utilized their collective leverage to force the state machinery into enacting permanent legislative changes. By tearing down the outdated statutes, the movement forced the government to rewrite its legal contract with its female citizens, guaranteeing a standard of protection they had long been denied. Despite the new fast-track courts, the legal process required 7 years to reach a final resolution. The defense utilized available legal maneuvers, extending the appeals process through every available court. It wasn't until early 2020 that the final mercy petitions were officially exhausted by the courts. In March 2020, the case reached its legal conclusion. The 4 surviving adult convicts were executed by hanging inside Tihar jail. The execution brought legal closure, but the enduring legacy of the protest lies in how Indians discuss gender violence. The movement established a new standard of public vigilance, replacing institutional silence with a demand for accountability. While it took over 7 years to conclude the specific case of Jyoti Singh, the events of 2012 created a lasting shift in public consciousness, one that recognizes its own power and refuses to return to the silence of the past.